Hey everyone, Cohen here, and welcome to the garage. Sorry for the crappy audio quality as always, but look at the mess that I have made. So what you're looking at here is the Supercharger setup that was created by a friend of mine. His name is Grant, and he is now a mechanical engineer for the Navy. He had built this setup a couple of years ago. I followed his project pretty closely because I was really interested in it. You know, a supercharged KA, if you don't know, is something that is, it's pretty rare. There's probably less than, I would say less than 10 in the country, and probably less than that actually work. I've never seen somebody build one of these and actually like, not just document it well, but actually like use it and show use of it. You see one pole down our street and that's it. So it's a pretty big mystery. So pretty much everything you're seeing here, he built. He fabricated himself, and I'm not talking about fabricated in, you know, a CNC machine, although there is one piece here in a CNC machine. Ignore that. You know, this stuff was made in his garage by hand and just off of, by feeling pretty much, you know. It's just a matter of getting the parts to line up together. So let's go through what I have here and what I don't have here, and well, just basically what the project will entail. Alright, so what you're seeing here is the Eaton N62 Supercharger. This comes off of the V6 Frontier OEM Supercharged version. So this isn't actually a OEM Nissan part, if you will, but obviously it's made by Eaton. And then what you have up here is just your factory Nissan KA24. I believe this is actually, yes, this is an S13 intake. So it would have had the throttle plates in it. Up here, they're no longer there, they've been blocked off. This is pretty much an OEM unit. It's missing a lot of stuff. There's typically another half of the intake that curls down, and then just a mesh of crap under here. None of that is here because it's blocked by this glorious supercharger. So in between, sandwiched between, you have this plate. He actually made this plate. They are available. This is just basically a piece of aluminum with the 4 holes drilled in it for the intake runners. And then you have a couple of sensors over here. I believe this is the map sensor, and this is boost for a boost gauge, so nothing much there. And then we have the, I believe this is wastegate control over here. A lot of this I have to figure out as we go along. Luckily he's still around to help out, so yeah, I'll be hitting him up for a lot of information. But over here you'll see this is the intake side, and this actually will be up against the strut tower of the 240. Okay, so here, I don't know if that's in focus or not, but this is, well, it's pretty much a quick and dirty intake made up. So this actually mounts up onto here, and that takes it away from the strut tower. It just barely clears, and then we just have the stock KA throttle body up here with stock throttle position sensor. Yeah, that. So then up here we have the coolant temperature sensor and the coolant temp gauge. This is just the regular water inlet and the heater core inlet. This is where the injectors should be. That is one thing that we need to acquire. So the fuel rail and the injectors will be coming off of the engine and the intake that's already in there. And just to give you a view of the underside, this is brake booster, and then that's basically it. You know, you got the wastegate here, but that's kind of everything. That's a lot less than a stock KA. And this is the belt, which is custom fit for the brackets that he made. So I've got to write down the number off of this actually. There, now I potentially have it on video so I can find it in the future. Alright, up next we have the other big half of this project. The supercharger part of it, like I said, is really only a small part of the build. This is the bracket that he made. Like I said, this, you can see this is just rough formed out of a piece of aluminum. Nothing is really machined here. Some of this stuff I do want to maybe clean up a little bit and you know, just round over some edges and stuff. But it works, it lines up, that's all that really matters. So that's it for supercharger bolt-on stuff. The rest of the stuff you see here is Megasquirt. I will be converting the car over to a Megasquirt ECU. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's version 2 or version 3. I think it's version 2. But you can see here, this is USB controlled, everything like this. I'm no longer messing with the factory OBD1 crap that nobody understands. Everybody has different theories about and stuff like that. But honestly, the guys who wrote the OBD1 systems for like the KA engine, none of those guys are even alive anymore. They didn't speak English, and everything is written in code that not everybody understands. So converting it to a modern Megasquirt system that is adaptable instantly to computers, so I can just hook the laptop up to it and see how everything is working, seems like the right way to go. That's what he did, and that was really the main thing I was excited about, was converting the car to Megasquirt. Supercharged is pretty exciting too. But this is actually partially the factory harness that has been adapted. This is about, I would say, 50% of the amount of connections of the factory harness. This is the stuff that goes to the board, which is, I don't know if you can probably see it or not, that goes to the computer. So this part goes to the computer, this part goes to the board, which I'll show you later, for power and all that good stuff. And we got an injector, injectors, and some other cool temp sensors, stuff like that. Map sensor, and really, that's kind of it. This is, I believe, O2, which is actually going to be a wideband O2. So we get the advantage of running the O2 and the wideband together. We don't have to have two different, think of it, sensors, yeah. And then this is the ignition module, which you can see photographed, is off of Ford. I'll show you that next. This is the Motorcraft coil that we'll be using. So it's got a 4-post coil. This is the stock front crank pulley, which you can see it has these teeth on it now. This is not factory. This is the part that he actually designed in CAD and had cut on a CNC machine, because this is pretty important. This is now the ignition timing, which uses this sensor to see, when it's rotating, and as it passes the teeth, that's how it counts when to fire the spark plugs, which I have the wires for that too. So that's cool, and that's one of the big components of this setup. We'll be losing the distributor on the factory KA, so that needs to be covered. But the best part about this is it means no more changing the ignition timing via the the actual movement to the distributor, and no more trying to figure out what the factory ECU is doing. I can now instantly, this guy is factory set to 10 degrees. So whenever I know it's at 10 degrees and it's not advancing, then we know something is not right. But then from the Megasquirt system, we can basically on the fly just advance or retard the timing as we see fit, or adjust it as for the engine is running. Alright, so there's the ignition. I think that's pretty much the ignition covered. This here is that board I was talking about. This is another thing that he made. This is actually in the glove box. Pretty trick setup there, so that'd be nice and hidden. And what do I possibly need a glove box for anymore anyway, right? This is just a nice layout board. It's got the relays and everything on there, some fuses. So I'll supply power to this, and that will be where I draw power for the ECU and the fans and anything like that. The gauge cluster, because the gauges will have to be a little bit different. We'll be able to retain the factory tach and the factory speedometer, maybe. That one's a little trickier, but like the fuel gauge should work and everything like that should work. And then this over here, this is for the O2 sensor or the wideband. This is actually the sensor, and I just made some nice little brackets here to go onto there. This is a nice coolant temp gauge, which is something that I've never had before. It's apparently lit and flashes and it does all sorts of crazy things, which is cool because KAs just love to overheat randomly and explode. So that'd be awesome to have. They also gave me a filter that needs to be replaced, but a little bit of an intake. That does lead me to another point, but let me get to that later. Let me get to the stuff that we need to do later. This is just going over the kit of what we have. Kit, using that term very broadly. This is just a big solid piece of aluminum with some holes drilled in it. This is actually the idle air control. So no more factory idle air control. This does that job for us. And it is completely adjustable again through the Megasport system. I believe once again this is a Ford. I can't remember. This is either a Ford or a Jeep part. I can't remember. And then there's just some other random stuff like boost gauge. That'd be nice to have. I didn't have that. In random cables, this is the cable to hook up to. I can hook directly up to the wideband here and plug it into the computer, so I can directly read what the air-fuel ratio and stuff like that is. Probably won't be necessary because I'll probably read it through the ECU. And spare coil, nice to have. There's a Ford part after all, come on. Okay, I think that's it for show and tell. So let me head back inside, I'll gather my thoughts, and we'll go over all the stuff that needs to be done to the car, what all else is entailed in the project, and where we go from here. I'm ready to get out of the garage for the day because it's currently 97 in here, and I'll sweat my butt off. Okay, so that's a pretty good look at everything that we do have, but let's go over some of the stuff that I will need, and just overall goals for the project and everything like that. Let's start with stuff we need. I need a fuel pump, because the stock unit will not put out enough pressure, because I will need better injectors. Obviously, if you watched the last video, the injectors I have on the engine are bad anyway, or the seals on them anyway. But he was using 370cc Q45 injectors. I will probably end up getting a set of those to begin with, but that'll be one of the first things I upgrade. I definitely want to do maybe a 550cc. He's using side feed, which some people don't like side feed injectors, and I don't blame them. They have their faults. If they fail, they leak into the engine rather than leaking onto the engine. You would rather have it leak onto the engine than in, because it doesn't dilute your oil and do all sorts of crazy hydrolocking and things like that. However, the price difference is huge, and I just can't justify converting the thing to top rail or top feed rail and all. Not immediately anyway. It's something to maybe plan for the future. Again, the battery will need to be relocated to the rear, because that is the side where the intake will now be and all the supercharger stuff, so that's a pretty obvious one. And obviously there's going to be odds and ends as far as the engine bay goes and stuff like that. I don't actually have a wideband gauge. I have the sensor and everything like that for it. I just don't have the gauge for it, so I will probably need to get one of those. And then, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know all of what I'm going to need as far as that goes, but that's kind of a basic rundown of what I'm missing versus what you saw there. So goals for the project. Why the supercharger? I guess is probably the question a lot of people are asking. I really do like the idea of having a unique build, doing something that not many people have done, and it's just like I mentioned before. It's something that I've long heard about and long read about and stuff like that, but I've never really seen anybody either pull it off well enough to use it, or maybe just not document them actually using the car. So I think that's part of what the appeal is to me. There are benefits too. Supercharger setup. This is an autocross car. First and foremost, that's what I want this car to be. I want to be able to go to autocross events and be reliable, but also competitive, because that's something that has never really been the case for me. So stepping up into street modified, I can do a lot more stuff, including the supercharger, but having that instant power versus a turbo setup, I think would be a huge advantage. Power goals, this car put 245 horsepower to the wheels, something thereabouts, on its previous setup. That was with a somewhat tired engine. he was always a little worried about it. It burned a lot of oil and stuff like that, but 245 horsepower is great. That is a number that I would be extremely happy with. I actually have a video, I'll put it in here, of the car running that. That's all well and good, but I want to be able to do that consistently. I want to be able to do that and not worry about it. The main problem that we'll be fighting is heat, because the supercharger is bolted directly to the intake. That could be changed in the future, but for what I'm going to start with, it's going to be bolted just like it is now.
We're going to keep it exactly like he has it, because that was an existing working setup. The problem there is, as you compress the air right there at the intake, it's going to skyrocket the air intake temperatures that are already hot, because I'm based in Florida, and hot air intake temperatures are not something that engines like. You get lots of knock and pre-detonation and all sorts of crazy stuff. So, like I said, that's probably the first and foremost challenge we have to face. How I'm going to combat that? The first idea is some kind of injection. And what I mean by that is either methanol injection, alcohol injection, or just plain water injection. I had started out pretty much 100% solid. It's going to be meth injection. That's the best option out there. It's going to be great. And then I started doing research on it, and the problem with that is the Supercharger has Teflon coating on the scrolls, on the screws, and methanol and Teflon, they eat each other, so that's not good. But it's not the end of the world. The reason people run meth is to basically increase the octane of the fuel. I'm not so much worried about that as I am cooling down the air intake temperatures. So running straight water will do that and not affect the Teflon. So that's probably where we'll start. That's going to be a very early part of the project, and is something that I think is important to the build. Okay, so there is the introduction to the project, if you will. I am really excited about the prospect of doing this. This is something I've been dreaming about for the better part of, really, realistically, 5 years. Basically, since I started autocrossing in Red, I have dreamed about doing this exact setup. So I know a lot more now than I did then. I didn't realize the challenges that are presented to me versus maybe what I thought were the challenges then. But it's going to be interesting, and I'm excited about trying to bring the process of the conversion to this new setup to you, and hopefully the video quality will get better as we go along. And you guys will learn something. I'll learn something from you. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, lots of comments, and lots of suggestions, and that's just going to make it all the more fun as a project. But don't try to convince me to go turbo. Don't stop. Don't do it. Okay, so I cannot end this video without thanking the guys from Automation. If you've followed the channel at all, you know that Automation has a huge role in the history of the channel, basically. I've essentially formed it around the game, but not only that, the guys that develop it are really cool. They were always real supportive of my channel, and I've always been real supportive of the game. I've gotten to know them better over the years, and they reached out to me when I first started to kind of consider the project. The opportunity was there to purchase what you saw today, and I was just kind of talking to specifically Daffy, as you know him, and pretty much instantly he stepped up and donated $200 to help me get closer to purchasing this setup. So thanks to those guys for everything, not just for the money to help fund this project, but for all the support you guys have given me on the channel over the years. That's been really awesome. There will definitely be a nice big Automation, the Car Company Tycoon game decal on the back window of this car. That's already in the works. I'm trying to get the design set, and I will be ordering that. Alright, and kind of on that note, if you guys happen to want to get involved in the project, you can do so. Down in the description, there is a link for a Patreon account that I have set up. Not only to support the project, but you can also just support the channel in general. It might not always look like it, but I do actually put a lot of time into this stuff, and I really put a lot of pride into it. So if you do feel like helping out and you feel like you have some spare change and want to check it out, there will be a link in the description for the Patreon account. Not pressuring, not begging, anything like that, but it's just I really like the format of Patreon. I set up some goals and stuff, and I've set up some rewards and some simple stuff, obviously stuff that's not going to end up costing me money, just to give you guys some even greater interaction. That's one of the things that I've always kind of tried to focus on. But I'll cover all that in a separate video. That's going to do it for this time. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're excited about the Supercharger project. There will be more Cone's Garage either way in the future. You'll be able to see if it's leaking or not. And if you look, it's probably a little hard to see. But on the bottom most